At the height of its war against Pretoria's apartheid regime in the 70s and 80s, the ANC went underground and into exile, where it established training camps, here in Uganda, but mostly in Angola, Zambia, Tanzania and Zimbabwe. Conditions were appalling, and to make matters worse, the South African regime managed to infiltrate ANC ranks. The result was a climate of suspicion in the camps that led to the brutal treatment of suspects. Witnesses say 32 were executed or went missing.
Among these violations were detention without trial, beatings, solitary confinement, humiliation, cruel and inhuman treatment, and death.
Amongst those implicated in tonight's report are half a dozen current members of the ANC's intelligence and security departments. Among them, in the red tie, is Basil Jomo Mavuso, one of Nelson Mandela's bodyguards. Senior ANC members are named. Jacob Zuma, Deputy Secretary General, accused of failing to prevent the prolonged imprisonment of an ANC activist. And Joe Modise, current Chief of Staff of the ANC's armed wing, accused of making arrests without cause. Also named, the late Chris Hani, assassinated in April. He sent suspected dissidents to the Quadro camp in Angola, knowing what that would mean.
The very fact that we have taken the public into confidence about the report of a commission which has found that a serious violation of human rights have been committed by our men is an indication of our good faith.
Tonight's report says the ANC should compensate those who suffered in the camps and they should punish the guilty. Inevitably, critics will say the report damages the ANC's credentials. The South African government, however, will want to think twice before they try to score political points. On human rights, their track record hardly allows them to pass judgment. John Harrison, BBC News, Johannesburg.
Of a black motorist after could hold important Nazi documents and treasures has been raised to the surface off the Danish coast. The salvage team say the vessel is in excellent condition. In 1945, the submarine slipped out of the German port of Kiel to escape the advancing Allied forces. It was sunk by an RAF bomber in the Kattegat Sea, just north of the island of Anholt.
48 years after being sent to the bottom of the sea by an RAF depth charge, U-boat 534 has been brought back up by a Dutch salvage team. The first job now is the simplest yet. High-pressure hosing to blast off mud caked 18 inches high in places. The hull had been stuck in clay on the seabed. Yet experts reckon the way the submarine is hanging from their cranes means 2 of the 5 separate sections inside are full of air. Quite how the other parts should be cleared of water has been exercising the salvage firm Smittac, whose executives arrived on the nearest island today, having assured their client that nothing of value would be pumped out with the seawater. But getting the submarine to the surface of the sea is really just the start. The breathtaking views of its deck and conning tower may have exhilarated those funding the salvage operation, but what's inside U-boat 534 could be even more thrilling. Gold, Nazi documents, other clues indicating what the vessel's final mission was. That's what they're looking for now. Churchill said the only thing that really frightened him was the U-boat peril. But in the final days of the war, with Hitler dead, 223, virtually the whole fleet, were scuttled. Fascination with the sunken submarine, which was discovered 7 years ago, was stirred by a mystery. Where was it going on the day of the German surrender, and what was it carrying on board? Because all 52 crew members escaped the submarine as it went down, though 3 died later, the Danish publisher paying for the search has not had German objections to contend with. The submarine is not classified a war grave. Some German crew members have come here to see their vessel rescued 48 years after they were. None seemed sure of the purpose of their last mission, but all seemed delighted when news came that the U-boat was up. Jeremy Vine, BBC News, in the Kattegat Sea.
Actual Nazi documents and even paintings are on board, hidden in a secret compartment. Other U-boats did carry valuables, but some experts believe the salvagers will be disappointed.
To the best of our knowledge, she sailed carrying a large amount of tinned food for the German U-boat flotilla in Norway, and also a considerable amount of engineering spares, including amounts of chrome and possibly also some quinine.
So no treasure?
Well, to the best of our knowledge, no.
Others say hidden valuables could account for the heavier than normal cargo. Before the questions can be answered, the U-boat has to be cleaned of mud and emptied of water. Her ammunition has to be disarmed in case it has become unstable. It could be another 3 days before historians get a chance to examine her rumoured booty.
Of an epidemic.
AIDS has become the biggest single threat to South Africa's health. But for the country's black majority, what help is now being offered by the government is too little and coming too late. In time, 4 million people will be affected by the epidemic. The concern is that during years of apartheid, Pretoria, aware of the fact that the virus was spreading south through the continent, did nothing for the most vulnerable sections of the community.
The government were vastly underspending on the AIDS prevention budget in relation to other countries, African countries, many of whom, all of whom, are much poorer economically than this country.
AIDS education within communities where male prowess and sexual promiscuity is a boast is offered on only a limited scale. Nationally, only 1% of the government's health budget is devoted to AIDS. The demand now is for a massive increase in public spending, to educate amongst people handicapped by high illiteracy, to supply free condoms, and to care for those suffering from the disease.
It's going to become a major problem in the next 10 to 15 years as people start to become ill with AIDS. We're going to find a situation where health services will be overwhelmed by a totally new burden of ill health in the community.
The government now admit that the impact of AIDS on the country as a whole could be devastating in economic as well as human terms.
It will affect our industry to a large extent. So we're going to look at a manpower shortage. Our medical benefits are going to suffer because these people are going to have to be cared for. I see other social benefits being affected by it. And perhaps it's going to put back our economic growth a long way.
At this Johannesburg hospital in Hillbrow, the most densely populated district in Africa, it's estimated that between 20 and 30% of all patients admitted for treatment are HIV positive. Until now, doctors have routinely tested for AIDS unless patients objected. Now, according to documents seen by Breakfast News, doctors have been warned by hospital authorities that they must first secure patients' explicit consent through counselling before they're tested. In cases of serious injury or language difficulty, that's not easy.
Not many patients refuse to be tested, but it's just a very long, tedious time to actually have to sit down and counsel the patient. And on a busy night, very often we found it very difficult to actually do the counselling. So in that case, we just don't test.
In which case the medical staff are left fearing the risk of infection, working as they do in conditions far from sterile and often with patients who require urgent, radical treatment. AIDS, then, is hitting the unsuspecting. It's adding massively to the burden of a medical service that's already overstretched and underfunded, and it's confronting a future South African government with a challenge which its predecessor knowingly sidestepped. John Harrison, BBC News, Johannesburg.